Diego was 26 years old. He worked for a small landscape and septic company based in Charlotte, North Carolina. On this job, he was helping install a sewer line that would later be important infrastructure for the buildings. Diego was standing in a shallow trench, about 2 feet deep, checking the elevation to make sure it was level before the pipe could be laid. Just a few feet away, his boss, the owner of the company, was operating a John Deere backhoe. They'd worked together plenty of times before. Diego was stooped and measuring the trench as it went through the site, making sure it was level and deep enough every couple of steps, basic quality control type stuff. The sound of the backhoe operating hummed in the background, and Diego ignored it. Without warning, something fell and struck Diego in the head and then crushed him across the trench. He didn't have any time to react, move, yell, or even see where it came from. He was dead before he knew what hit him. But what happened? Diego's boss, probably trying to make the best use of his time as he waited for Diego's trench measurements, turned the backhoe onto a dead tree just a stone's throw away from him. He pushed on the dead trunk, trying to clear the land, but the bucket of the backhoe swung just a little too wide. It pushed that dead tree a little too fast and a little too much toward Diego. The dead tree didn't offer much resistance and gave way with little coaxing, and it came down right on top of Diego, 27 feet tall and only 18 feet away. Diego's boss watched in horror as the tree he was pushing on fell not just toward Diego, but right on top of him. He parked the backhoe as safely and as fast as he could and jumped to help, but it was already way too late. The OSHA investigation uncovered 3 serious violations. First, the company had no written accident prevention program in place. There was no site plan, no job hazard assessment, no documented effort to identify or control risks. Second, workers were not wearing protective helmets, even though they were working around heavy equipment and falling object hazards. And third, the site hadn't been cleared of surface hazards, like the very tree that killed him. It was already visibly decayed and shouldn't have been anywhere near a live excavation site. Diego was in a trench, focused on his task, trusting that the site was safe, or at least that someone was watching his back. But the tree fell anyway. The total fine the boss was given for being the immediate cause of his own workers' death was $5,250. Usually employees are killed indirectly due to an owner or management negligence. It's rare the actual cause of death is the specific actions taken by the boss themselves. What do you think? Is this an accident, homicide, or straight-up murder? I personally think the boss's negligence of his employee is outrageous. Let me know what you think down below. Duncan was a 42-year-old avalanche control technician working high in the mountains of Olympic Valley, California. Oftentimes, the vast amounts of snow at ski resorts can create avalanche conditions. Sometimes these resorts will utilize explosive devices to get ahead of a natural avalanche, which is unpredictable, into a forced avalanche, which they can prepare for and anticipate. An uncontrolled avalanche can be triggered by a single skier or snowboarder and can bury unsuspecting victims in tons of snow and ice. It's a certain death sentence. Needless to say, explosive devices used to encourage an avalanche is risky business for several reasons, but also necessary. One morning, the avalanche conditions at this particular ski resort were determined to be too risky to not do anything, and a controlled avalanche explosion is what Duncan's boss ordered. We're not sure if Duncan was on skis, a snowboard, or a snowmobile, but he was out there preparing to place and detonate one of the explosive devices to initiate a controlled avalanche and relive the pressure off the mountain. We also don't know what kind of explosive he was handling, if they were a type of remote explosive or a timed one. We don't know how much power they packed, or if this was a newer device the resort was using or an older model. This was mostly routine and mostly familiar activities to Duncan. His job was to place an explosive at the best location where the blast of the explosive would knock down the majority of the snow. Easy. But something happened that would make this Duncan's last shift. Somehow Duncan fumbled the bomb. Maybe he misplaced it, or perhaps he timed it wrong. There could be a chance the gloves he was wearing that day were different, or a million other variables. We may never know the specifics of how or why Duncan fumbled it. What we do know is that when that explosive went off, Duncan was too close. Extremely close. So close that the bomb he placed exploded right into his abdomen and he died shortly after. The investigation revealed that the company had failed on several important points. First, they failed to follow proper snow avalanche blasting procedures, bomb placement, detonation distances, maybe even proper handling. This critical safety violation ended with one of their employees getting blown up. Second, they failed to have a formal accident prevention program. That failure wasn't just a paperwork problem, it was a gap in the system meant to protect workers like Duncan. For violating safety regulations, the employer was fined $9,900, and Duncan never came off that mountain. Next time you visit or drive by a ski resort, just remember that when the snow piles high, someone will need to grab a bag of bombs, drive through already sketchy conditions, and blast the snow down to make it safe for everyone else skiing and snowboarding. What do you think? Would you do this kind of job? I think I would just hire a drone, personally. Let me know in the comments. Logan was 34 years old. He worked for a small tree service company and was doing some high-risk work, cutting trees along the edge of a bluff, a rounded cliff, for landscaping clearance. It was mid-morning when Logan began cutting one of the trees. As it started to fall, it got caught in the limbs of a nearby tree, wedging itself awkwardly instead of coming down clean. Naturally, Logan moved to the second tree that caught it and started to cut it, planning on both of them toppling over the edge of the bluff together. This predicament would create the situation that would make this Logan's last shift. He crouched down with his chainsaw and began cutting. But before he could finish, the first tree, the one he thought was stuck, broke loose from the vibrations of the chainsaw. It struck him across the shoulder and back, knocking him off balance and sending him over the edge of the bluff, along with the tree like a pair of dominoes. He struck multiple objects on the way down before landing on his back across another tree at the bottom. The trauma was fatal and Logan didn't survive. The investigation found several critical failures. First, the company had no hazard communication program, a basic requirement for identifying and managing chemicals. We don't believe the lack of a chemical communication program contributed to Logan's death, but sometimes the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, OSHA, catches whatever is available. Second, Logan had not been provided with proper personal protective equipment. The investigation is unclear which pieces he lacked, but a personal fall arrest system, something like a harness and lanyard, would be one of them. And finally, they were cited twice under the General Duty Clause, meaning the employer failed to provide a workplace free from known and preventable hazards. Our guess is once for the fall hazard and another for the falling tree hazard. There was no spotter, no fall protection, no protocol for dealing with hung-up trees near an unstable edge. This was a chain reaction of unmanaged danger, one decision leading to another, with no systems in place to stop it. The total fine for Logan's death came to $12,000. A 34-year-old tree worker fell to his death after being struck by a tree he thought was trapped, and the fine was $12,000. What do you think? Is that justice? Should anyone be cutting trees at the edge of a bluff without protection, backup, or a plan? Let me know what you think in the comments.